What do you know? We're back with another Tuesday night live stream. Super excited to be back. Thanks, guys. Appreciate everybody for joining again tonight. So I think tonight, as you guys will see with the kind of little thumbnail, this was kind of got to thinking the other day. Actually saw a few people or a couple guys that were that were here at my place last week. Um, we kind of got to chatting a little bit and started talking a little bit about values and all of that. And again, that's all subjective, but it's always very interesting from my perspective to see exactly what some of those things are to each individual. So I've got a few bottles over here that I'll kind of bust out, and then we can get into just chatting a little bit about maybe what we're to each of us, undervalued, overvalued, underrated, overrated, all of those types of things. And you can have a combination of all of those. So I think it's kind of interesting within the whiskey world, what kind of falls into those categories. So that was kind of tonight's theme a little bit, was just to kind of see or get everyone's perspective on, again, value, in those kind of, different categories. So it's always kind of fun, again, like I said, just to see exactly what everyone's interpretation of some of that stuff is. So let me go back up and say hi to a couple people that were in right away. So Top Dog, as always, good to see you, Johnny. Mr. Randall, good to see you, buddy. Joey B, how's it going, Joey? Good to see you as well. Mr. Roy R at home, good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you jumping in tonight. There's my boy, Marty, Whiskey Nose. Good to see you, bud. What do we got? Mr. Reese, good to see you as always. I appreciate you joining tonight. TK, good to see you. Maybe you got a night off. I don't know. Maybe you're not out in the field or doing something with a combine or whatever it may be. But hey, thanks for jumping by. Or maybe you've got it set up in the combine, which I know you've done in the past. So Mr. Mays, good to see you again. So Eric was one of the people I was talking about who came over last week when we had a little get together over here at my place. Just had some whiskey and some food and some good conversations and all of that. After all, that's kind of what sharing whiskey and everything is really all about. So there he is, Sugar Kitty. Good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you jumping in. Who else we got? Hi, Stacy. Good to see you as well. 4-Leaf Whiskey. I saw you guys did an Irish pick last night. Wasn't able to tune in. Was kind of coming back from out of town, but yeah, saw you guys were doing that. Hopefully, you ended up with a nice bottle. So, JG, the ball buster himself. Good to see you, brother. Mary, good to see you. I appreciate you jumping in tonight. You'll be interested with a video I've got coming up that has everything to do with the bottle that you were nice enough to donate to the channel. So that'll be coming up pretty soon. I'll keep you filled in on that one. So, what else we got here? Mr. Fritz, good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you jumping in as well. Joe, the sample guy, good to see you, Joe. Appreciate that. What else we got here? Mr. Jenkins, good to see you as well. So, all right. So, yeah, what we'll do is it was hard to kind of pinpoint or nail down a bunch of bottles. So I tried to keep this thing as kind of relatively shelf bottles for the most part, because I think that gives everybody a good opportunity to have either had a chance to buy the bottle or at some point have had it. And none of these, for the most part, I think are going to, really break the bank. So it'll be interesting just to see, again, what it is at, when you start talking about, undervalued and overvalued, underrated, overrated, how all of some of those things kind of fall into all of that. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how all that stuff goes. So, but yeah, so I guess leave a little comment, I guess, in the chat. Let me know maybe some of those bottles for you, and we'll kind of get into a few of those. But what I'd like to try to do with the first, 10 minutes or so is just kind of catch up with you guys a little bit, see what maybe any bottles you've purchased lately, or maybe any questions that you may have for either myself or anybody else in the chat. So fire away when you get a chance with that, and we'll kind of dive into tonight's little theme live stream, I guess. So, but hopefully everybody is doing well. Now we're into, well into the new year at this point. So hopefully everybody again had, good holiday season and all that. It's kind of nice to be through all of that, get into everything. But yeah, and one of the releases that just happened not that long ago, we'll kind of talk a little bit about this, but this will be the first bottle, and it's one that we oftentimes probably criticize the most, I feel, within what it is that we do, or just trying whiskey, all of that. But this bottle, I'll say, which I'll kind of let the cat out of the bag, is released obviously 3 times a year. I think a lot of us know probably what that is. And knowing what it used to be versus what it is now, and obviously the different age statements that are coming, each quarter, or I guess it would be 3 times a year, so a third of the year. Um, that's kind of a bottle that I think it feels like we again nitpick it the most, and I think it's just because it set a bar again at that 12-year, originally 12-year age statement. And then it's fluctuated, up and down. Most of it, I would say, has been, at or below that 12-year mark at this point going forward, but it's an interesting bottle. And I guess without further ado, it's going to be this guy, this is the newest release, the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof A125. So it is one of those things, or one of those bottles that, again, in my opinion, is maybe the most, nitpicked, all while being maybe one of the more anticipated releases, kind of throughout the year. So it is one of those bottles to me that kind of falls, into that category. So I guess my question to you, and it's going to be that going forward all night, where in the kind of what we're chatting about tonight, undervalued, overvalued, underrated, or overrated, where does the ECBP kind of fall in your eyes? And again, I think that can have a lot of different things, but again, undervalued, overvalued, underrated, overrated. So it is one of those bottles that, again, I think we could chat all night long about one of these things, but or this bottle. But again, it's just one of those things. Here's my piece, and then we'll kind of get into really everything else. But I think at the end of the day, it is one of those bottles where it always comes with like a high anticipation of what that next bottle is going to be. So when you try it again, this one coming in, again, if anyone's unfamiliar, 118.2 proof. So again, one of the lower proofs that they've had in quite some time, 10 years, 7 months. Again, one of the younger bottlings that they've had in quite some time. But again, still a batched bourbon. So the youngest within this blend is going to be the 10 years, 7 months. So still, I think for $75, this feels still, in my mind, a pretty decent value. So this is not going to be about me. I'm more interested to hear kind of your perspective on where this bottle kind of falls into, a category for you. So let me just go back and, yeah, JG definitely wasn't the Basil Hayden. I kind of let the cat out of the bag on that. So, all right, what do you got here, Joey? I love that you do the live stream. Oh, live tea. Oh yeah, I appreciate that. I try to do those for the patrons and all that. So I hope to be part of one soon. Also wanting to do more meetups. Keep up the great things, bud. I appreciate that very much. No, I've no nap today, so I'm still good to go. I'm not going to be falling asleep anytime soon. But all right, what do you got here, Thomas? I just got the private barrel EC barrel proof bottles and more higher proof. Oh yeah, from the higher one. So yeah, and I get that, with those being, basically the single barrel. So that again is going to be a little bit of a difference. You're going to have those being the single barrels versus the batched. So again, that's all perspective. You may get a slight, kind of different profile on some of those. I would say, now I've seen some of those kind of creeping up. Like Thomas said about the with the ages. So again, those are kind of factors. But again, we've got all of these kind of, benchmarks for what it is that makes this particular bottle, that to you in that category. So, all right, Aaron, what do you got? So ECBP is still a value at MSRP. It's 10 to 12 years old, non-chill filter bourbon. Yeah, and it's findable. I'll say that. For a while there were, I don't know, going back probably more during COVID and all that, where things were a little bit more difficult, maybe. But it was a little bit difficult to find. Not everybody found it. So now it does seem to be a much more available bourbon. And again, I think at $75, again, give or take based on, where you live, in my mind, I still think it's a really nice value. Some people may argue, and I guess I'll say for a cask strength bourbon from a heritage brand, where do you find, that kind of bourbon? I'll say now for $75. I'm sure somebody's got an example of that, but there's not a ton of them. I mean, Elijah Craig or Heaven Hill could have easily raised this thing to $100. Now, I'm sure a lot more people would have complained, but they've kind of kept this price pretty consistent all the way through. So I kind of commend them for that on that part of it. So um yeah, I just think when you start to do the comparison game, the value of that for what it is you're getting still feels where it's appropriate, especially in today's day and age. So all right, Marty, what do you got? I think the larceny has gotten better, better and better in the last few releases. I would agree with that as well. So larceny, I think it started out, a bit concerning, and then as they've released them over the years, I think they've really kind of started to figure that out a lot more. So let's see, Mary. I love the ECBP. Some batches are always going to be, but yep, exactly. And that's, I think, one of the fun parts about this being released every, or 3 times a year, is that anticipation of what is going to be next. What are they going to get? What are they going to give us next? Higher age, higher proof, lower age, lower proof, whatever it may be. I think it becomes kind of a fun anticipated release that we have. That's not always going to break the bank. I think this still falls within that category of it being right in the middle and not like a super offensive price or anything. So yeah, big larceny fan. My perception of the ECBP is that it's pretty much valued right where. Yep, I agree with you. Agree with you 100%. So cheers, Paulie. Good to see you. Mr. Wiley, good to see you, buddy. ECBP is still a good value. But since I have like 20 of them, yeah, okay. Well, again, this is going to fall into it. So since let me start up. So ECBP is still a good value. But since I have like 20 of them, there is zero reason to pick up another. Yeah. And again, that is another part of the equation is how many of these things. And again, I know not all of them can be the C923s or whatever it may be, but again, I think when you kind of talk about the value for what it is you're getting, it still feels like it's kind of one of those still pretty decent values. So yeah, and that's an argument, there as well. So, so here's a good example of, when you're talking about age. So this is I'll say a good example when you're talking about Jack Daniel's single barrel proof, or if we're going to stick with either the bourbons or ryes, none of those have, big ages on them at all. They're just, where they're stored, they get hit with a lot of high heat. Again, not overly, aged, but full of flavor. So, we nitpick this thing to say, oh, the Elijah Craig barrel proof, this year it's only 10 years, 7 months. Well, the Jack Daniels aren't 10 years, 7 months. I can tell you that. So, again, when you start to, this is my argument for this bourbon being nitpicked more than a lot of them is when you start to factor in age and all that. If you want to talk about age, to price, Jack Daniels is maybe a little closer to that, from a lesser dollar standpoint, but still those bourbons are anywhere, again, in that same kind of range when you're talking about, the Jack Daniels, single barrels and whether it's a bourbon or rye. So again, I don't think age is always a huge factor, but that's a good comparison. So I think the electric barrel proof is unique that it's one of the very few bottles that we compare against each other. Yeah, again, I think it's the one that is maybe compared the most out there. And again, I could be completely wrong, but for me it is one of those bourbons that I think it just hits exactly where it kind of needs to be for me. I've always been a big fan of it. I probably always will be, and oftentimes it's a benchmark for me, for a lot of things. So it's something that I kind of still enjoy for like what it is. I try not to nitpick it too much. So what's up? What's up, Adam? Good to see you, buddy. Mr. Schwartz, good to see you, bud. What else we got here? Someone's got to fix Renee's dinner for crying out loud. Get after it. Get after it. Let's see. So, okay, rare breed better than ECBP. All right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe you can make the argument. And again, it's subjective. So if you like it better, that's fine as well. You're not going to get an argument from me. It probably wouldn't necessarily be that for me. I still think this is a richer, more complex overall bourbon than the rare breed is. That's my opinion. But again, if you like it more, to each their own. So what's up, Richie? Good to see you, brother. I appreciate you jumping in tonight. What else we got here? Anything else? Yeah, and we can get off the ECBP. We'll move on to another one and just kind of see what we've got coming up. So looking forward to the 2025 releases like New Riff, Ben Holiday, Hard Truth. I think, there's always the anticipation for everything. I think that's what kind of keeps a lot of us as enthusiasts, still in this and wanting more. It's always that wanting to try different bottles, things like that. So what's up, Steve? Good to see you, buddy. Mr. Perkins, good to see you as well. All right, so let's move on from that. So we've already covered the ECBP, and again, I think overall it feels like still in today's market a good enough value that does not make it, I'll say, offensive or anything along those lines. So, all right, here's an interesting. We'll kind of move this thing along a little bit. So, all right, so from Brown Foreman, what do we think of this guy right here? This has always been a very interesting pour for me, but this is the Old Forester Signature 100. So chat away. Let me know what you think of the Old Forester Signature 100. And while you guys are doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about it for me. So this was early on one of those bourbons that really got me thinking of just, I guess, how overall enjoyable a bourbon can really be. It wasn't expensive. And I remember, going back years and years ago, this thing was, I don't know, I'm going to say maybe $20. It's probably crept up a little bit. I don't know if it's more 25 or 30 now, but still, I think it is one of those bottles that remains very kind of tried and true. I still feel that it's probably one of the better releases that they have that nobody really ever has to talk about too often, but never really seems to get talked about, even amongst a lot of us. I feel like that probably has a lot to do with that. A lot of us are looking for more cask strength, bourbons, things along those lines, things with maybe more age. But for me, as a daily sipper goes, I don't want to say, you can't find better, but it's a very, very solid everyday pour. And I'll say for $25, I don't know if it's more or less for a lot of you guys or not, but it really seems to be right there in that wheelhouse for people that you don't have to really think about what the cost of that is. What the flavor profile generally is. It's definitely not going to break the bank if you want it to sip on. It's a great little sipping bourbon. If you want it for cocktails, it's great for that. So in my mind, it's maybe one of the, again, one of the better lower dollar values in bourbon. So discuss amongst yourselves. Yes, yeah, carry on. I'll just sit here and wait for you guys to just chat away. And so great mixer. So all right, Roger's a fan. Mary's a fan. Best bottle at that price point. All right, John, you got to give that thing a try. I think you'll see everybody kind of putting in the comments their thoughts on it. So all right, so Johnny enjoys it. Truman, cheers, buddy. Who else we got? Top Dog enjoys it, like I said. Richie enjoys it. Mary does. Roger does. Roy does. Yes, he'll discuss with himself. All right, Paul, he more than enjoy it. Boom, Old Faux 100, my long-standing best budget. I recommend when it is definitely one of those bottles where it kind of falls into that category for me as well. So, yeah, and I would say this, John, on top of that, it is maybe one of the more unique rye profiles that is definitely, in my opinion, different than a lot of the other just more standard and lower dollar ones. So if you've never tried the Old Forester rye, for me, it's a must try. I think it will definitely make for an interesting or a different kind of cocktail, but try sipping on it. See what you think of that profile first. So I believe it's a higher malted barley. So it came across as, much more like lemongrass, much more floral, a little bit softer, but definitely with that kind of, floral-ish, kind of profile to it. So, yep. So yeah, between that 25 and $30, I think it's a very, very solid, solid pour. So yeah, again, when you're talking about, undervalued, overvalued, underrated, overrated, yeah, I think this definitely falls into that undervalued and maybe even underrated type of category. So I would agree. You definitely need to visit or revisit the Old Forester 100. It's a really, really good one. So, and again, Nicholas, I thought about throwing the Beam 7-year in there as well, but it's one of those things where you're kind of limited on what you can throw in here. But I would agree the Jim Beam 7-year, that black label, is a really, really nice underrated little bourbon. So. Yeah, what it was new. It was new Forester back in the day. So yes, look at this guy. He is sharp on a Tuesday night. So all right, William. So William loves the signature 100. The 100 proof like is like, yeah. So I agree with that as well. So um two verklempt. Nice. And not very often, I think, do I get verklempt. That's for sure. So yeah, kind of surprised. I mean, Old Forester, I think, is pretty good when it comes to budget. Now they're kind of like their Whiskey Row stuff. To me, I think starts to creep into that category of maybe one or two of them being a little bit higher priced than they need to. I think they're far more in line with this at roughly half the price. I think some of those, that Whiskey Row kind of collection, some of them can be around that $50 price point. I'd love to have two of those for what one of those would be. So that'd be my argument from there. So, all right. So I think we've covered the Olfo. Seems like collectively it's a pretty popular one. So, all right, we'll get into something a little bit different now. This will be kind of interesting to see where this brand and this bourbon kind of he agrees. This guy, he's probably sipping on tequila or he's got himself an IPA, that's for sure. So, but who knows? Looks like the wife let him have the phone tonight. So what's up, bud? I told you I was getting ready for stuff before. So anyway, I'll give you a call tomorrow. So here's the brand. Now you guys tell me. So Peerless as a brand, as a bourbon, you let me know, where does this kind of fall within? We're going to kind of shake things up a little bit with this. This is always one that I think really kind of piques people's interest a little bit, on different scales. So again, leave a comment. Like JG said before, talk amongst yourselves, figure this thing out a little bit. But for me, Peerless is one of those kind of very interesting brands. I enjoy Peerless, But when you start talking about, value and all of that, it is more of a, like Richie says, a premium brand, definitely from a price point. But, if you guys see um, if you see Peerless like on a shelf, or if you're even, in Kentucky or wherever it may be where you get Peerless, I guess let me know your thoughts on that. Overall, I've heard a lot of times people think it's too expensive for what you're getting. Again, when you're talking about age and all of that, but it's kind of an interesting brand, and I've always thought they've done a really really good job, even from early on when the stuff was pretty young. And now that it's kind of aged up a little bit more, it's kind of interesting to kind of hear and see people's perspective at this point. So, okay, let me go back here. Looks like looks like looks like I kind of no, Blanton's is next. I'm not gonna do Blanton's. I didn't want to get in. We'd get people too fired up. I thought about throwing Blanton's in here, but I feel like that's just kind of like, you know, kicking a horse while it's down. So I'm not gonna do that. But okay, so let's see. What do we got here? So JG says Peerless is great if you get it under MSRP. All right. I guess whatever that would be. I don't know. I think MSRP on some of these things, the bourbon is what, maybe $80. I'm not sure what the MSRP on this one was. This actually just happened to be a single barrel pick of that we did. I just grabbed the bottle, just in general. So, all right, William, what do you got? Hit or miss? I've had really good single barrels. Others were just overpriced. Yeah. So again, as when you see the brand or you see a bourbon, what is it that kind of just naturally, comes to mind? So Thomas is not a fan. All right, Marty's got price themselves out of the market for me. Okay. Jeff says really like Peerless, but I think it's a bit overpriced. Okay. Steve, Peerless is good, but overpriced for what it is. Paul's going with a hard pass. Overpriced and somehow lose barrel pay. Yeah, I don't know how that happens. Don't get me going on that. So, all right, Sugar Kitty. Peerless makes some great stuff. They can distill for sure, but unless they get to their great pick, yeah. Again, I think that's probably one of those things, and you don't know that until after you've already tried it. So, all right, Nashville Mac says prices keep rising and the bottles are hard to find around me, but the Peerless Double Oak is just next. Okay. All right, cool. I guess you dig that. So again, Thomas is way overpriced. Some Peerless single barrel bourbon are fire. Not a fan of the rye as much. Okay. I can get down with that. I enjoy it, but never had. Okay. All right. Oh, all right. So you're still on the Old Forester. Okay. So I'd pay 75, but pushing 120 around me. All right. And I was kind of curious what some of the prices are on some of the Peerless stuff for everybody else. I thought for me, like it was around like maybe 80 or $90, but I haven't looked in quite some time. But all right. Travis says Peerless is a little out of my price range. Prefer Pursuit. Okay. No problem there. I can get down with that. Yeah, the price point is too high in the Peerless for what it is. I think that's one of those things where that has kind of always become like the sentiment of Peerless, is that I think people enjoy it. They're maybe just not always willing to pay that big price, especially if it's something from someone that they don't know anything about, especially if it's a single barrel from that standpoint. But yeah, anyway, I think that kind of falls where I thought a lot of the Peerless stuff would be for you guys as well. So all right, so Adam actually has never had a bad Peerless, so that's good. Yes, the Ghost barrel was ridiculous. That was a short barrel, that's for sure. So, all right, let me move ahead a little bit. We'll pick up another one here. All right, Tom paid $90 for the double oak, almost the ceiling for that. Okay, all right. That's kind of what I thought. I thought Peerless would kind of fall into that category of maybe a little bit, not really like a super overpriced, but kind of overpriced for what it was. And again, I kind of had a feeling that's where we were going to be with the Peerless. So, all right, I got a couple more for you guys. Tommy says, I've only had a few Peerlesses, not a fan, and won't be going back. Okay. All right, so JG is clearly a Peerless fan. All right, interesting. All right, so let's see. What do I pick? What do I pick next? We'll try to rapid fire this. So for anybody who is a patron, so at about maybe 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern, we'll be doing kind of just a little live virtual happy hour. And I already sent out the link in Patreon. So if you guys want to jump on there later, there is a link if anybody's interested in becoming a member. It's pinned in here as well. But we'll be doing a lot of good stuff coming, by the way. But tonight I wanted to just kind of catch up a little bit. It's been a while since I did a Patreon only live, so I wanted to catch up. So for anybody who's going to be up around 9:30 Eastern, jump on if you want. Grab maybe your most recent M&J picks, and we'll have a couple of pours. So, all right. With that being said, let's move on to the next one. Let's see. What do I want to do? Oh boy. All right, here's one. This is going to maybe fire some people up a little bit too. I've always heard some kind of mixed opinions on this. So, what do we think of this bad boy right here? The Makers, I mean, that's maybe a little better. That's a little bright there. Anyway, Maker's Mark cast strength. So, what are your thoughts on that overall? So this is probably one of those bottles that seems to get very it's just very interesting to kind of hear people either love it or kind of hate it. But I kind of wanted to see what it was that you guys thought of the Maker's Mark cast strength. Now, here's what I'll say, William. I would agree with you 100%. And I think the issue or what it is about Maker's cast strength, I think in that maybe $40 range, a cast strength wheated bourbon at that kind of price point, decent enough age, I think, but for what it offers, I think it's a tremendous value in the cast strength wheated bourbon, kind of category, so to speak. So, they've been one of the leaders, I guess I'll say, obviously in wheated bourbons, but from a cast strength standpoint, they've been around for an awful long time, and it's just been one of those bourbons that I think offers, a great value again, and a just for a great cast strength bourbon. There's some people that love it or hate it, but I'm a fan of what it is and what it has to offer. So, let's see. What's up, brother? Good to see you. All right. So Roger's a fan of the cast strength, the Maker's cast strength. So for Johnny, one of my go-to, especially for blending. Okay, I can see that. Eric says, good bottle, not talked about much. I would agree. And again, I think it just becomes one of those like kind of staples that is always available at a really good price that just kind of sits there. So it's always an interesting one for me as well. So Sugar Kitty says, I actually downgrade to Maker's 101, which I think, again, is a slightly underrated bourbon myself for the reasonably priced wheater, particularly for a sweet mixer. Yes, I would agree. It definitely has a sweet, candied kind of profile to it. That's for sure. So Richie says, Scott, it's good stuff, but not complex, but priced right. So I would agree. And I think, oftentimes, wheated bourbons, I don't know. I guess I kind of struggle with trying to figure out. I don't know if they have the complexity that a rye based bourbon has. So don't kill me for saying that, but I think more often you get those richer, heavier notes from a rye bourbon than you do a wheated bourbon. But again, whatever it is you get, that's great too. So. Tom says, I've had this one, very underrated and nicely priced. I'd get a bottle. Yeah, I would agree there. Justin says, good value, but not there just for many. What does it say? Good value, but now there are just so many good. Yeah. Again, I think when it comes to, you know, what it is you are kind of looking for, then maybe this is something that is not, in your wheelhouse. So, Travis says, I prefer the finished or store picks at cask strength for makers. The regular cask has too much of that sour dairy. Huh. Interesting. Okay. All right. Maker's 46 cask strength is the best of the bunch. Now, again, so Randall, I guess the argument would be, findability for the Maker's cask strength. Not that it's not better or anything like that, but this is like pretty much, I'll say, everywhere, almost anywhere you go. And I'm just going to say 40, 45 bucks, versus maybe almost double, close to double for the Maker's 46 cask strength. So when you factor those two things in, I don't know. Would you rather have two of these or one of those? So again, I'm just making the argument from that standpoint, not to say one is better than the other, but I would say the Maker's 46 probably overall is definitely more complex. So if you're willing to pay up for that, then I have no problem with that at all. So, yeah, weeders can be a really, really kind of interesting type of category for me. And some of them at times can be very hot, almost like alcohol forward hot, and I don't want to say grainy, but again, that wheat comes through. But when it starts to get where a lot of that ethanol is really coming through, it gets to be kind of difficult for me from that standpoint. Just not overly enjoyable. So Fred says Maker's Cask is one of the best values available. One of my staples. All right, good to Maker's Cask about 35 to 45, and the Maker's 101 between 50 and 60. Interesting that it's that much more. Huh. I see them both for about almost equal price. So Nashville Max says just poured it. Too medicinal cherry up front and drying oak finish is a bit much, but I should blind it with some. Yeah, I think that's always a good idea. So, all right, Jay Sills. I like Maker's Mark more than I like the Kansas City. Nice, which isn't saying much. All right, fair enough. That's fine. That's fine. Tom says I prefer the Maker's cask strength, but was disappointed by the Maker's 46 cask strength. I get a marker note. Interesting. Maybe from that weeded standpoint. But all right, so let's set that one aside. Let's do this one. This is always an interesting one for me, and kind of really seems to have fallen off the radar for whatever reason. I'll let you guys make the decision as to why it may have just kind of fallen. I don't know how to say out of favor, but it just definitely doesn't get talked about nearly enough. And it's this guy right here, the Heaven Hill Bottle and Bond. So I'll say this about that bottle right there. I think it makes for a great everyday, more complex than a lot of other 100 proof, bourbons. I think it has a lot of great flavors that really hold up pretty well. Now, for me, it's about 45, maybe 50 bucks, but usually I can find it for around that $45 price point. Now, I don't know what it's priced for a lot of you, but I think if we start getting above $50, that's for me where I would probably cut this one off a little bit. But I think under that, it still feels like it's priced appropriately. But for me, I think Heaven Hill is one of those really nice everyday bourbons that should kind of be on everyone's bar. That would be my kind of impression or thought on that bottle. So all right, what do we got here? So a fantastic bottle at 40. Yeah, hey, if you can find it at 40 bucks, even better. So the Heaven Hill Bottle and Bond is my go-to first pour. Yeah, I think it's a great. I think with the amount of oak and kind of maybe some fruit and some of those kind of I don't know, I'll say like kind of pastry-ish kind of Like I did a review, and there was something about this like coffee cake between like the molasses and the brown sugars and maybe some cinnamons. I kind of got a little bit of that vibe from that, but I think the oak that's there is sweet enough that allows for the finish to feel longer, so it just feels like a more like richer pour in my mind. So yeah, Heaven Hill bottle on 7 year. Keep at least two at all times. Yeah, I think it's a great bottle to have all around, and great for sipping, great for cocktails. Again, falls into those categories. And I feel like it's one of those. I feel like it's one of those bottles that, again, you can use it for any of those, and it doesn't matter. You can just use that and feel comfortable either way. So Top Dog says, I own a bottle, but don't think I'll replace it when it's done. Interesting. Okay. All right. Randall says, oh boy, that's definitely a hit or miss bottle. Travis says, most stores around me sell it and HM. What am I missing? Oh, sell it and HM. Well, maybe I'm missing that. 59, but if there were 39.90, it's the right price. Okay. So Nicholas says, just got a Heaven Hill bottle and bond pick for $55. It's pretty solid. Okay. That Heaven Hill is great value bottle and bond bourbon. It's well worth trying. I would agree there 100%. I get the Heaven Hill bottle and bond. Man, $40. That's a good deal. I think for $40, that's a no-brainer. That's like a house bourbon at $40. The Heaven Hill bottle and bond is decent, but $55 here. Better options for that for me. Yeah, because you live in Tennessee. Everything is like expensive there, it seems like. I don't know why, but Tennessee is like they don't want anybody mailing anything to that state. They want to charge you guys a arm and a leg for everything. What is it you guys are paying for? Trying to buy like a better football team, or what is it? I'm trying to figure that out. Randall says that's really a hit or miss bottle. I really had some bad ones recently. Interesting. Okay. Because this is a newer bottle for me, maybe within the last month or so. Maybe not even that, maybe 3 weeks. I've only had like a couple pours out of that. So all right, Mr. Wiley. I got it when it first dropped, and really 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. And again, that was coming off of, I don't even know I don't know if anyone's ever even had. Some of you guys, I'm sure, have had that, but I've got a few of these things, kind of laying around. And again, that was a big deal when this thing used to be, $12 or $15 versus now, let's say between 40 and $55. So Steve says, all right, not a fan. Let's see. The Heaven Hill bottle and bond doesn't disappoint. I guess I just call it the old white label. Yeah, well, there you go. There's the old white label for you. So again, it was. I mean, that was a tremendous value. I mean, this bottle back a few years ago was, I mean, at 12 or $15 was as good a value as we'll ever see again, probably. So better than early times. Interesting. Well, I think that's a very good comparison. That'd be a good little head to head. Might be a good little video to do. Heaven Hill bottle and bond versus the early times. Yeah, interesting. Look at you thinking. Yeah, it's good. That's a good suggestion right there. Sugar Kitty says, to me that competes against 1792 full proof and rare breed in the price range, and I don't think it wins against those. Okay. Yeah, and again, you're talking about, with the rare breed, what was the other one? 1792s. Yeah, big proofs on those, or bigger proofs, I'll say anyway. So yeah, definitely probably needs to go into a blind. Lamar says, agree between Heaven Hill bottle and bond, Henry McKenna for daily. I can't complain, Heaven Hill. Yeah, I would agree. That's probably a good comparison too. So what's up, Tom? Good to see you, buddy. Heaven Hill bottle and bond and Russell Reserve 10-year, the bottles that I told others about when I used to see her, when I said we needed to blend a bottle at a lower price point. Yeah, that's pretty spot on, actually. Marty uses it as a control pour. So I can see that. Even though I think there's a heavier oak note. Like if I was going to use like a control pour, for me, I want something that's probably a little bit more neutral. Maybe not as much oak. For me, I get a little bit more oak. If I had something like that as a control pour, which is again, I just want to have like a I don't know, like a Buffalo Trace, something that is just not very like overwhelming, but just gives me a little bit of that bourbon, kind of on my palate. So, but this thing has I think a great sweet oak note. So, what do we got here? Man, $60. I don't know if I'd want to pass, or I don't know if I'd want to buy it at 60. 60 probably is a pass for me as well. So Thomas is sipping on that one right now. All right. So hopefully you're a fan of that. Mr. Henson says, I have one bottle of the old black top brown Foreman early times that may stay bunkered. All right. Well, yeah, that's an old one. That's for sure. Yeah, I've got a few of the green label ones downstairs too. Again, for a 90 proofer, man, that's a nice little a 160. Oh God, I wouldn't pay $160 for that. Jeez, that's a little crazy. So early times bottle and bond for $25 all day. Early times is one of those things I'll say that is not, and again, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think early times is like everywhere like this is. I don't see early times, I'll say really at all. So for me, I could walk into a store and this will be just about anywhere. So I don't know if that's the case or not. So all right, Louis the Ninth. Wheel Horse Cigar Blend at $35 is amazing. All right, cool. John says Heaven Hill Bottle and Bond is $50 in Ohio. Can take it or leave it at that price point. I think that's fine. I have no problem with that. So $50. Yeah, Tom, we should probably chat about maybe doing a live or something. You can shoot me an email or I can shoot you one. We can figure something out. Yeah, the Evan Williams Bottle and Bond. I think just, for maybe like a $20 bourbon, I think it's pretty decent. I don't think it has the richness, in my opinion, that does. But, overall, I you can't argue with that, Tommy. So, what else we got here? Yeah, that's same thing for me too. So the early times is a really difficult one for me to find as well. So all right, so let's move on. Now I've got three more we'll try to fit in the next whatever 10, 20 minutes or something like that. So all right, let's do this. Let's do this guy. I think this will be kind of a fun one. A little quick little tease. Nah, just messing with you. All right, your thoughts on this guy? Undervalued, overvalued, underrated, overrated. Where do we fall with this? This is I'll say this about that bottle. It's a newer one for me, but not newer. It's just a newer bottle. But I'll say this. This may be one of those things that's an unpopular opinion, but oftentimes I get like just a little bit too much like ethanol, like alcohol notes where I really feel like this thing needs to like burn off almost. So admittedly, I think it's a good value. I just for me, it's not something that I'm overly crazy about. So undervalued. All right. One of the best values on the shelf. Okay. I have no idea what the context of this is, but I'll leave that one alone. OGD 14114 is good. Never cared for the OGD 114. At value or for the OGD 14, not excited about. All right. Okay. Fred says solid value, excellent for cocktails. Yeah, that can be definitely a proofy cocktail. That's for sure. OGD is underrated. I prefer it to benchmark. Probably the best as a mixer. Okay. Um, I always have a few on the shelf, 29.99. It just for me, it's even cheaper. It's like $5 cheaper around me. It may even be less than that. I think it might be 22.99 by me. So still a great value if you're looking at, proof and value, and what you get for that. Again, heritage brand with it coming from Jim Beam. I think it still offers up all of what it is you guys have kind of described. It just for me, I think there's other ones that I would rather have just because it gets a little bit like actual alcohol, like that alcohol note is not something I really enjoy that much in a bourbon. When I say alcohol, I'm almost thinking like a rubbing alcohol for me. So Sugar Kitty says a definite go for me. Okay. You too. Going at it already. Okay, I see. Um, makes a great infinity bottle. Huge mouth, huge mouth. Yes, that's a big one. So that's for sure. Um, so Daniel says 1114 is a great high proof mixer. Neat. I find it a little bit spiky. Yep, I would agree with you there. Total Wines here charge 35. Oh man, it's almost $36 for OGD 114. I don't think I'd want to pay that. So yeah, maybe the bottle and bond definitely a lot cheaper, maybe even a little bit more approachable. I definitely get less of those alcohol or like that rubbing alcohol kind of note. So Cheech, my man, how are you guys doing? How are you and Jen doing? I'm glad you popped in here. It's been a while since I've seen you. Hopefully you guys are doing really well. OGD great blend with Woodford Double Oak. I just don't know if I'd want. I'd struggle trying to blend with that one just because I'm not a huge fan of it. But Henry says I enjoy OGD 114 as a budget bar pour. You're all at overpriced stuff. Yeah, I mean it probably can be, and I would never overpay for that thing. So it definitely comes with a big fat cork, that's for sure. So hard find. Interesting. Oh, harder to find the OGD bonded. Okay. When you had a little OGD one OGD 16 year, that might actually tame that thing down between the kind of nice oak on the 16 year. It's kind of an interesting one. So Richie says, Scott, is there a bottle you want to get that you haven't seen yet? Mine is the Still Austin Tanager. Yeah, that was one I was trying to get my hands on as well. And actually one that I would really, really like to kind of get my hands on. But boy, I'd have to think about that for a second, Richie. Man, $24. Yeah, about what I pay here. Maybe even a couple bucks cheaper. So yeah, that Tanager, man, that thing came and went really, really fast. So all right, so 114 seems to be kind of pretty decent or a popular pick amongst the group. So all right, I've got two more, and I'll go with maybe this guy, which out of the gate was, from what everyone said and trying it, it was an extremely, extremely popular bottle for a while, especially when it first came out. And it kind of just fell off. For me, it's a great, like, everyday bourbon, something I really enjoy the flavors of. But this guy, the Four Roses Small Batch Select. And I threw this in there. I thought about throwing the 100 proof in here, but I wanted to throw this one in to see what people's thoughts were on that bottle, like, specifically. For me, now I'll preface by saying, like, I'm a big fan of what Four Roses does. I like all of that. So, I think for each of us, that plays a huge role in terms of value and why we're willing to pay those prices. But for me, this is about $55 for me. I'm fine with that. 104 proof, non-chill filtered. again, blends of the different recipes. I think, when it first came out, people raved about it. I don't think it like really gets worse. I think it just becomes one of those bottles that just sits on the shelf that is a really nice bourbon that just kind of gets forgotten about. So I'd love to hear, your thoughts on the Four Roses small batch select. So um all right, Johnny says great value. Richie says Four Roses Select is a fantastic bourbon. I agree with you. Solid pour, man's pour. Okay. All right. Always wanted to try it, just never could pull the trigger. I'm assuming, Tommy, you're talking about the four batch or the Four Roses small batch select. I'm assuming, you know. Um, ooh, the small batch select, another underrated offering. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a severely in today's day and age, severely underrated, underrated bourbon, and one that really doesn't get talked about nearly enough. I think it's just a really nice everyday kind of bourbon. So one of my first whiskeys on my shelf. I'm a little biased because it started my journey, but I like it. All right, yeah, Roger. I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's just a great bourbon. Like Four Roses on its own is so approachable, enjoyable. You just can't get into like a comparison game with Four Roses. It just doesn't have that kind of profile where it's going to hold up to, you know, big, rich kind of like, Beam or Brown Foreman kind of profiles. It just will get destroyed by those kind of bottles. So Thomas says best $50 shelfer in my opinion. Okay. How different is the select versus single barrel shelfer? So this one is it's different recipes. I forget which one they use on this one, but I think it's seven, I believe. One, two, three, one, two, maybe six. Yeah, six different recipes that they use for the small batch select, non-chill filtered, 104 proof, and I think it just adds a little bit more. I think there's a little bit more richness, a little more depth to it, where it feels. uh, I'll say this: it feels more in line with some of their LEs than than the Four Roses single barrel. So I think this is a bottle that can maybe at times, depending on the LE, it could kind of go toe to toe with some of them. So I've had them next to each other, and there haven't been huge differences between them. So I think for being able to find this just about everywhere, and again at $55, I think that says a lot about it. But that's the big difference right there. You get the six different recipes versus the one with the single barrel. Well, now it's different because they've released those others. So yeah, it does make kind of I think a good gift. It's approachable, bottle looks kind of fancy, especially if you're giving it to somebody who doesn't know a lot. I think it's a very enjoyable bourbon for an awful lot of people. So Four Roses Small Batch Select is Kim. Yeah, well, I know Kim's a huge Four Roses fan as I am. So definitely Big Vic says underrated daily sipper. Agree. Mary says great bottle. I agree there as well. John says this is one of the underrated in my opinion, but you're right. It does get forgotten about. I haven't had a pour of it. Yeah, and I haven't either. I had it sitting right over there on the other side of the camera, and was thinking that man, I haven't had that in quite some time. And I just wanted to see what everybody else's kind of perspective was on that one. So, yep, she's a slapper, that's for sure. So Sugar Kitty says, okay, bourbon, not worth $50 though. Actually prefer a single barrel compared to that, and it's cheaper. All right, so I get it. I would say just based on that, maybe Kitty, you're probably not overall a huge Four Roses fan. I'm just guessing, but um, Justin says shelf staple and a good value in my opinion. Fred says, I find the Four Roses Select an enjoyable pour. That's a good value. Everyday pour. Absolutely. There we go. All right. Let me let me skip ahead a little bit. So Buffalo Bourbon Enthusiast, cheers. I probably missed some of that stuff. Corn and whiskey, small batch select is tasty. Yes. According to Four Roses, it's fruit forward. Yeah, I agree. Typically 6-7 years. Not a lot of. I mean, not a lot of Four Roses stuff. Oftentimes has big ages on it. So for that to be in that 6-7 year range, for what it is, I think blending all of those different kind of recipes together is and can be kind of a difficult task. So all right, so final one before we wrap her up, and this is going to be kind of an interesting one here. I kind of saved this one. So again, we'll go back to Jim Beam, but what are your thoughts overall on Knob Creek 12? I know with the price, somewhat limited availability, but let me know your thoughts on this guy. Is it undervalued, overvalued, underrated, overrated? Where are we at with the Knob Creek 12? So again, for anybody who's not had it, 12-year-old Knob Creek at 100 proof. So, again, this is kind of where it kind of gets to be a little bit interesting. Now for me, like it's never $55. This thing's probably, I think I paid maybe 75 if I'm not mistaken. So that's most of the time what I see it at. If you can find it for less, great. But again, I think we're going to get into some of these comparisons with the Knob Creek for sure. Yeah. So I pay less for the Knob Creek 120. And again, this is where I kind of thought this would go a little bit as well. So it kind of does fall into that category of when you're trying to figure out, value and all of that, is that at 100 proof, worth buying when you could get like a Knob Creek, kind of like single barrel for maybe less than that. So now if you can get it for that 50 or $55, that makes it much better. It's got the oak and the richness, all of that at 100 proof all shows up because of that age. That's for sure. So it does make for a very, very enjoyable 100 proof bourbon. So again, not a cask strength, whiskey, but if you again are not always wanting cask strength, and I'm not always, wanting that either. So I find myself, on a, I don't want to say nightly, but in the evening, if I don't want something big, heavy proof, and I still want flavor, a bottle like this really kind of falls into that category. So for me, first time on a stream and new 100 proofer, great stuff here. Yeah. Cheers, buddy. I appreciate you, jumping in here tonight. I knew I had maybe not seen the name before, but yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining tonight. Let's see. Knob Creek 12 is underrated. Probably the bottle I've rebought the most over the years. My favorite daily sipper. All right, no issue there. And it's kind of does. It falls definitely into that category. So Knob Creek 12 for me is one of the best values out there. I bought mine for $60. Yeah, man. If you can get them for less than that, I mean 45 or 50, that's great. I don't know if it's because some of them sit on the shelves or people don't want to buy 100 proof or whatever it may be, but yeah, that's maybe why. So let's see, what do we get? And guys, do me a favor, if you haven't yet, hit the thumbs up. I appreciate all that. Hit the subscribe button. If anybody who's new in here, hey, thanks for joining tonight. I'll take all the love I can get. That's for sure. Appreciate you guys. Let's see, what do we got here? Knob Creek single barrels are different than the 12. Those are unique. The 12 is superb. Yeah, and again, you do those are kind of different beasts. That's for sure. So Fred says I like Knob Creek 12 when it's less than 60. Think that's a fair price for what it is. Definitely has rich flavor for sure. It is definitely a rich bourbon. That's for sure. It's definitely just a price thing. If it was $50 instead of 65, then change the value. Agree, 100%. So I think for those that get it for, that $15, maybe $20 less, it becomes a tremendous value. So Justin says one of the best values, slightly underrated, perfect Kentucky profile bourbon. Yeah, it does. It probably does have a very kind of standard or typical type of bourbon. Man, I just realized I haven't even had one pour. I've just been blabbering all night long without even having one sip. This is just the originally poured the Old Forester Signature 100. But cheers, everybody. Thanks for joining tonight. Greatly appreciate it. So again, if you're part of the Patreon community, I've already dropped in Patreon the link for the live tonight. So if you got a couple Mash and Journey bottles that you want to sip along, or if anybody got their Pursuit United, grab that. I'll grab a couple of the more recent ones that we've had, and we can just we can kind of sip and catch up a little bit tonight. So what else we got here? Man, $70. Yeah. I mean, it is that's typically what I see at 70, $75. I almost never see it for less than that. So Henry says all the JB stuff they're introducing. What am I missing here? Bring back the Knob Creek 12 cast strength. Yeah, that'd be nice too. That was a really nice bottle. So I'd say that was a really nice one. Oh man, that Old Forester is such a nice fruit, oak, caramels, brown sugars. Man, good little bourbon right there. All right, so it seems like it's depending on value, if it really kind of falls into that category that $70. Oh man, I don't know. Would I continue to buy them? I don't know, a little bit on the fence about that. So I like it. I just don't know if I'd want to pay $70 or not again, or $75. If I could find it for 50, then it falls definitely into this category. As far as flavor profile, this probably has a even richer, with it having 5 more years of age on it, it definitely becomes a much richer kind of profile. And I think at 100 proof, that makes it very, very doable from a daily kind of bourbon. So we blinded the 1924, the Knob Creek 12 Coopers, and a local experiment bourbon finished in stout local 1, and then 1924. I think Knob Creek 12, then Coopers. Knob Creek 12 should be 60. Tops perfect. Yeah, I would probably agree. I wish it wasn't, in that 70 or 75. Less is pretty good. So Beam needs to get off their ass and brings the cast strength 12. Yeah, that'd be great. I think a lot of us would enjoy that. That's for sure. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't know what you guys were paying for the cast strength. I thought when I bought the bottle, it was either like 90 or $100. I don't remember it being that much more than this. So 2 excellent underrated bottles right there, Knob Creek 12 and Heaven Hill. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. So small batch select is a solid price. Yep, solid for the price. What else we got? All right. Well, hey, I think that kind of covers that's every bottle I have. I have no more in terms of a comparison. So that chewed up an hour and 10 minutes. But thanks. I appreciate everybody joining tonight and being kind of a part of this little, I don't really say experiment, just kind of fun to hear, your perspective on things as well. So it just, obviously we all have our own opinions, but it's fun to just kind of dive into a few of these, maybe see what people are paying for their bottles in their areas, what makes them, bottles they enjoy versus not. So there's lots of factors, but like we all know, at the end of the day, you drink what you can afford, what it is you enjoy. That's it. It's as simple as that. So if you can afford it and you enjoy it, then buy it. Great. That is exactly what this is really all about, and nothing else. As long as you can, be with friends and kind of share those different experiences, and you don't have to like anything that they do and vice versa. It's just a matter of being kind of together, sharing some different things, and just, again, maybe there's some differences that you have that the other person has. But again, that's what makes, I think, enjoying whiskey what it is. It's one of those things where it's subjective, and again, you buy what you can afford and drink what you like. So with that, thanks, guys. I appreciate everybody for joining. For those that were new in here, I appreciate everybody for joining. And yeah, I mean, for all the faces and the names and stuff I see an awful lot of, I appreciate each and one of you as well. So thanks, guys and ladies. Fun topic tonight. So we'll be back next week. So I'm going to start putting a couple of other things together. I'd like to try to have a few people on over the course of the next, month, talk about some brands, talk about with some brand representatives, things along those lines, and just kind of, kind of go down that road, so to speak, a little bit. It's something I enjoy doing, and kind of just sharing other brands or newer brands information and all of that. So with that being said, remember, for the patrons, I've dropped the link over in Patreon. So I'll be over there in probably the next, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And grab a couple M&J pours. If you got the Pursuit United, grab that. Whatever it is you want to sip on, go over there, hop in the chat, put in there what you're going to be sipping on. I'll see if I can find the bottle and sip on that with you. I'll eventually open it up for a little while as well tonight in the Patreon stuff. But thanks, guys. I appreciate everybody, and thanks for joining tonight. And as always, like I say, it's about the journey, not the destination. Cheers. We'll see you guys next Tuesday. Have a good night.